True privileges. We get very few true privileges in life. Privileges that are born out of trust and honesty and responsibility. Being a parent, being at someone's side as they take that last breath of life, and sharing somebody's story. Being trusted to tell a story that they believe you can tell just as well as they can, and they lived it.
Pictures truly are amazing. They help revamp memories, they tell plenty of stories, and they take us back to different times. Times of hope, family, love, change, and even oatmeal. But while pictures are amazing, it is easy to forget the things that are just as phenomenal. Things like language, sentences, and words. Words are some of our greatest tools. In February 2021, I had the incredible opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with local policymaker and game changer, a woman who has used words to help those hurting the most by telling stories of the hardest times in her life, and a woman who will continue to do so far into the future. This is her story. It isn't her full story, and it's only a small part of her story. But it is such an honor to share her story, the story of Jolene Loetscher.
I grew up in Northeast Nebraska. I have, even when I say Nebraska, I kind of have a little bit of that Nebraska twang still. But I was a farm kid, and our family farm is still up there, and went to high school and school in Wayne.
Although it is sandwiched between cornfields and hours away from the most populous areas in the state, Wayne, Nebraska is anything but ordinary.
If you look at the water tower when you come through, Wayne, America, because that's what they put on the water tower, not just Wayne, but Wayne, America. And then it is also home of the National Chicken Cluck-Off Contest. Big, huge deal.
The Wayne Chicken Show started 18 years ago. They chose chickens because almost everyone in this area has some knowledge of chickens, and they can also be considered humorous. Our most famous events is the National Cluck-Off.
Were you in that cluck-off contest?
I never did the cluck-off contest. So they have the chicken days. And I did the song contest. I did the egg decorating contest. I think those were the only two I did. And I can't sing. So that tells you how well that went. So, yeah.
That's fine. I mean, you tried, right? That's all that matters, right?
It's all that matters. Yeah, I tried. I embraced it for the journey that is life.
Growing up, I knew that there were two things I would not be. One was a teacher. And there were generations of teachers before me. My mom sits right over here. And I could not do what she did. I could not go into a classroom of 6- and 7-year-olds and think that the chaos was the most amazing sound I had ever heard. So teaching was out. The other thing I knew I wasn't going to be, and that was a farmer. My father sits right over here. And generations before him were farmers. But if I wanted a green thumb, I couldn't even take a Sharpie and draw on that thumb and make it green, as much as I may have wanted to. But what I could do is I could be a storyteller. And through storytelling, I could both teach people and help them grow. And that's why I decided to become a journalist. Started when I was 19, and I always said journalist because I used to think a journalist is somebody that truly experiences what happened, not just a reporter who regurgitates facts or tells you something. And as a journalist, I got to tell amazing stories.
So journalism for me was a calling of public service. Anything that I've done always tends to come back to that. Journalism, when I decided to pursue it, was really about serving, giving people information, telling stories that needed to be told, holding accountable the voices and the leaders that needed to be. And so I very much felt called to it as a profession of service.
I got to tell the story of a Canton mom who woke up in the middle of the night, her lungs filled with smoke, and all she could hear was that shrill sound of a fire alarm. And she realized that the only way to get to her 3-month-old daughter was to punch her hand through a glass window and climb in and pull that little girl out of her crib. My privilege was being able to share that little girl's story. Even though she never saw her first birthday, she touched a lot of lives, and that family trusted me with that story.
I think the industry has probably changed a lot, and society has changed a lot in how it judges journalism and what is defined as true journalism versus, we have so many pundits and columnists and those sorts of things. But I was, very much trained in a traditional sense that journalists don't have opinions and they don't take sides, and, you gather everything up and then you put it out there for the public to see and decide and have.
But what I never realized through all of those stories, the hundreds and thousands that I told and I shared, was that there was one story that I couldn't even see, one story that I needed to tell. I want you to see who you were as a teenager, that first moment that you got your driver's license, and that feeling of freedom, being able to do whatever you wanted, go wherever you wanted. And remember that moment. Well, somehow, the state of Nebraska decided to give this girl, who was 4'9" at the time, a driver's license too. And at 4'9", usually the Taurus that I drove looked like it was on autopilot because you couldn't see me from the back. And I had learned that the only way to see really over the steering wheel was to sit on 2 books. You couldn't use a pillow because the pillow would smush down. It was a calculus book and a chemistry book, and I could see. And somehow, state of Nebraska said, yeah, that girl passed, we'll let her drive. But when I look at her, and when I look at my driver's license, I don't think of the freedom that most teenagers do, of going to parties, hanging out with friends, shopping. But for me, it was being able to, maybe even just once, maybe more than once, be able to drive myself to and from work and to and from a home where I was a babysitter. And at that house, I watched a little girl, precocious, kind of sandy blonde curls, full of life, and we became very close with their family. When you say family friend, they were more family than they were friend. So close that when she was in her last hours of life, dying from a brain tumor, we stood in her hospital room, held her hand, and hugged her. And that was a privilege. But what no one knew at the time was, at the same time, I was working for her father. A Main Street business, kind of that Norman Rockwell image of what we think of as small town America, Main Street, picture perfect store. But when I walked through that Norman Rockwell door, for me it was a Stephen King horror film. Because he would take me into a back room with that kind of damp, musky smell, and he would take off my clothes, and he would touch me and molest me and rape me. A man that was a teacher, a revered business owner, a church leader, a father, someone who would say, I love you, I love you. And I was horrified, thinking I was just a child. And he took my clothes off, and he raped me. And the next day he said, you know what I did to you yesterday? I have it all on video. And in those moments, I died. Who I was ceased to exist. And I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't that he explicitly put words of fear at me or toward me or in me, but it was that he implicitly made me fearful of all the things I could lose. My full ride scholarships, my 4.0 GPA, the pride of my family, the honor in my community. And I thought I could lose all of those, and I couldn't tell anyone.
One of the saddest parts about Jolene's experience is that her reaction to it is not uncommon. In a 2018 article titled 5 Reasons Why Victims Wait to Disclose That They Were Sexually Assaulted, Shara Kostovitz, a licensed clinical social worker with Jackson Health System, reported that in 2018, every 98 seconds, an American was sexually assaulted, and that not everyone who was assaulted told somebody, until days, weeks, months, or even years later, due to feelings like shame, fear, uncertainty, guilt, and avoidance of the fact that they were sexually assaulted.
You can only push back pain for so long, and eventually it builds. It takes you over. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was a breaking point, literally a breaking point, where I had to confront what had happened. I didn't know how to process it. It was, socially, the world was in a much different place, even though it was, only 10, 11 years ago. But to talk about it just wasn't done nearly as much as it is today. And so for me, it was confronting what had happened, working through it, going to therapy, deciding I was going to put purpose to that pain and speak openly so that others knew that they were not alone in what they may be feeling or going through. And, speaking as part of that about even my suicide attempt, and that people know that the journey to heal is not easy. And I had hoped that when I did, and when I still do talk about it, that for people that may hear that, I don't want anyone to ever get as low as I did.
It's not a topic that people publicly come out and say, I'm a survivor, but it's one that we should talk about because it happens more than we realize. 1 in 4 girls by the time they're 18, and 1 in 7 boys, it's estimated, will be sexually abused. Of those, 90% knew their abuser. 88% of cases, it's expected, do not go reported, such as mine. I didn't report it. I didn't even let myself believe it had happened. I pushed it so far back and so far away and locked it in the deepest, darkest parts of my mind that it didn't exist. Until a February day 2 years ago. Cold, brutally cold. You know those bitter days when you go from your car to the house and it's only like 7 or 8 feet, but you get inside and it's more than being chilled to the bone, you're frozen in your soul. And on that day, I got inside, and I was so cold, and the only way to warm up, to get my hands to move, were to put them under hot running water. And I did that, and they got feeling in them. And I looked over at the clock on the stove, and it said 5:32. And I opened a bottle of pills, and I took every single one. Because I knew there was no other way I thought I could go on living. Because it wasn't that I wanted to die, I didn't know how to live. And I wrapped myself in a kind of dingy, gray, white comforter, and I closed my eyes and thought, I won't wake up tomorrow, but at least I won't be cold, and at least this darkness will stop following me. And the tremendous thing was, the next morning, even on a February day, these beams of light came through our wooden blinds, and I felt this warmth, and I realized I was still here. I was here. And I was here because I had a story left to tell, and I had to tell that story. And that was why what I had thought would take away the cold was really my way of finding the warmth.
I had watched Jolene's TEDx talk many times before our conversation, and at this point, I have lost count how many times I've actually watched it all together. But I must admit that before the interview, I was very nervous to ask her about her experience, and I still am wincing every time I hear her talk about it. Telling her about this fact led her to give me some great insight on the topic at hand and the discomfort people have in discussing this subject.
It's not comfortable. Absolutely, it's not comfortable. Is it polite conversation? Well, I don't think it's polite that we have, we have children suffering in the state. Here we have 4,000 children every year reported to be sexually abused. That's sexual abuse. And then, on top of that, we have, thousands of children that face physical abuse, verbal abuse, don't have access to stable shelter or food. And so you think about all of that and the trauma it imparts on a child, and then how that impacts the rest of their life. And so, is it polite that a child doesn't know how to go through a pain that was put on them that should have never happened? No, it's not. And so, conversations like this, Vinny, are so important because, you've never talked about it. You never had that conversation. You're nervous to have that conversation, and that's okay, because the next time it comes up, it won't be as scary. It won't be as nerve-wracking, and we break down walls, right? That is what public service should be in so many ways, is building walls to protect and breaking down walls that keep us from action, right? So this is about building and constructing, and so that's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable with it.
I knew the closure wouldn't exist for me, but that I would pray for justice, I would find peace, and in that peace, I would find a purpose. And for me, that purpose is what I call self-spiration. It is my goal of building a camp for child sexual assault survivors, where they can go and they can share their stories, they can be with others, and know that they are not alone. And it's also a place for adult survivors to come and put purpose to what happened to them. Because we are survivors. It's no different than someone who's diagnosed with cancer. We did nothing to deserve this, but we fought through it. Self-spiration is also a place to celebrate birthdays. Not the kind of birthday that we usually think of with cakes and candles and Chuck E. Cheese or presents, but the birthday of empowerment, the birthday when we take our power back. And for me, my second birthday was on January 15th, 2011. I just want to record this so that I can look back and I can see how far I came, and I can remind myself that I have nothing to be scared of, and that He holds no power over me, and that I am a strong, empowered person, and that He needs to be held accountable for what He did. And there's nothing that can happen to me. 45 seconds later, I was at his front door. My husband, Nate, at my side. And I believe my grandparents watching over me. And I rang that doorbell, and he came out. And I knew that whatever he said didn't really matter. He could have said anything. What mattered was that I left knowing I had said what I needed to say. And I looked at him straight in the eyes, and I said, I know what you did to me, and I will not be quiet.
Just feel whole. I think the black hole is gone. The shadow is gone. Like, I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm just so relieved. It's over. Just like this nightmare that I've lived with for so long. And like, you wake up and the lights turn on. And you realize that you had control of it. Like, you know, like, I was in control then, and I'm in control now.
Growing up, and still very much so, even though they're not with me, my grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather on my mom's side, were really influential. They were just truly leaders at their core. They just very much instilled in me a foundation of faith, but then also service, and that those two are not exclusive of each other, that they actually, to do one well, you have to have both.
We're here at the pier with Representative Peggy Gibson from Huron, District 22. Representative Gibson, what's the best thing to come out of the 2015 session?
Well, thank you, Corey. The best thing that I think to come out of the 90th legislative session this year is the reinstatement of the Jolene's Law Task Force, because that is going to deal with child sexual abuse in our state. We're going to try and get a cultural change going, education going, get lots of different people in the field together on what to do about this epidemic problem of child sexual abuse, because 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys is afflicted by this throughout his or her lifetime. And we really need to get going on this problem.
Jolene's Law, Billie came out of deciding that I was going to put purpose to the pain of my childhood, and having been a survivor of child sexual abuse. Originally started when I decided to publicly speak about what had happened to me and shared my story and my journey of having been abused by a family friend, not knowing how to deal with that, what to process of it, and deciding that pushing back was going to be my way of surviving. And I was able to work with a state senator, and we removed the statute of limitations on criminal rape in South Dakota. And so you think about 2012, it was before the Me Too movement. It was actually before Penn State and the Jerry Sandusky case. It was really groundbreaking in general, but I think especially for this Heartland area, it was even more so. And then from that, in 2014, South Dakota enacted Jolene's Law, and Jolene's Law lays out a 10-year strategic plan for ending child sexual abuse, but really child abuse and child maltreatment now, as we say, across the spectrum. And so that day-to-day plan and that goal lies now in the responsibility of the Center for the Prevention of Child Maltreatment, CPCM. So they execute on the day-to-day. And, when we started and people said 2026, like, you'll never end child abuse by 2026. And I said, well, maybe not, but what if we do? Right? Or what if we end 5%? Or what if we end 10%? Or what if we end 90%? And so we knew that if we didn't very clearly state a goal, especially on an issue like this, it it tends to be something that people can push aside because it makes people uncomfortable. No one wants to talk about abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse of children or adults. No one wants to talk about that because it is uncomfortable. But I always say, if it makes you uncomfortable to talk about it, imagine how uncomfortable it must be, how horrible, awful it must be to go through it. And so, is your discomfort in the conversation somehow greater than the pain a survivor goes through? And would you not go through this conversation in order to end it? And so that's kind of how Jolene's Law came to be. Some of the real hallmarks that I'm extremely proud of that we've done over the years that have come out of it have been the creation of a regional reporting center in Watertown, South Dakota called REACH. So now no child in South Dakota is any more than 2 hours away from a reporting location if they have been abused, which was one of the feedback that we had initially from law enforcement was that we were having to drive kids 3 or 4 hours, and that just wasn't acceptable. So there is now a regional reporting center to help with that. We have done mandatory reporter and adverse child experience training. So train the trainers. They've gone out and trained even more. Some of it is online as well, with more than 25,000 have gone through those trainings. And so you think about the size of South Dakota, 25,000 is a lot of people, and we keep having more and more. We have also created a certificate program at USD for people that want to study child and adult advocacy studies, with the eventual hope being that will become its own major or minor. We've created pediatric rape kits. Prior to this, pediatric rape kits, they didn't exist in the state of South Dakota. And so those have been created and distributed across all healthcare locations and sites, including those of our tribal communities as well. So Indian Health Services, and so that when a child does come in, there's the appropriate reporting information, and that facilities where maybe they don't see a child reporting in more than once a year or every couple years, we've streamlined that so a nurse can take that, they can take that kit, have that information, and just really help pursue justice.
Look at that blouse. You don't seem to be exactly the type to make this guy behave like a human being.
Knowing the way women are objectified in the business, she wears androgynous clothing. However, the minute she chose to step out of her home wearing a tank top that showed some of her cleavage, she was subjected to a whole section of the internet talking only about her boobs.
Do you know me?
Did anyone mention to you why there's chicken cutlets? I was 16. I had never seen a chicken cutlet. I didn't use them. I was a kid.
Really know me?
And one of the producers comes in, and my brother is like, "What? What is that? Why is that here?" And I was like, was this your idea? To the producer. And he or she looked at me and said, "This came up higher than me." It was a studio note.
You have opinions about my opinions, about my clothes, about my body.
No, this article just gets worse and worse the more you scroll down. In recent months, a change has begun to make itself known on the actress's Instagram account. Her posts have taken on a more sultry, even adult nature. For example, the post Brown shared on October 29th shows the actress in a satin leopard print mini dress looking defiantly at the camera with her mouth slightly open. The second photo in the post is a mirror selfie in which she pouts at the camera as light falls flatteringly on her torso. Can't do this. Bro, just say she wore a dress.
Would you like me to be quiet?
In front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, "a fucking bitch." I have encountered words uttered by Mr. Yoho and men uttering the same words as Mr. Yoho. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity.
is your opinion of me, not my responsibility.
What we do in our house when we talk about food and body is that we talk about primarily one, in your life, there are two muscles that actually matter. Your heart, wrong way, right? Your heart and your brain. Those are the muscles that, my brain isn't working maybe. Those are the muscles that no matter what, we want to be strong and beautiful. And then we focus on having power and energy for our body. That doesn't contained by like the size of clothes or anything. So we're really conscious about the language we use, knowing that we are raising a daughter, and that's really important. But I think when you are a young person, a young adult, and you see this double standard, because undoubtedly it exists. I've heard it so many times throughout my career, when I was on TV or anything, where you're judged by how you look. Even when you're mentioning the shoulder, I remember being told when I was running for office more than once, I wore a lot of sleeveless shirts, and I was told that was inappropriate, that as a woman I should not expose my shoulders. Like, my shoulders are not what should be judged here, right? And so I think if you see those double standards, one, it's a question of, well, is it a double standard? And it comes down to, if this was the standard for a man or a boy, if they had to go through these many conditions to be appropriate, is it equal, right? And probably not. But then also when you see that, and if it isn't equal and it's wrong, and you feel called to change it, then change it. Then speak out, take action. If you see that the school dress code has a double standard for how girls can wear their shirts, and there isn't one that's the equivalent for boys, then go to, be an activist, get engaged. This is where, when we talk about policy matters, and you hear that, I think, more and more, policy matters at all levels. And so if you're 16 years old and you're in high school and you see this double standard, that's a policy, right? That dress code is a policy. And you change policy through the power of people. And so if you see that double standard, you go to your principal, you go to your superintendent, you go to your school board, advocate for the people and the voices that you represent, if they're you or if they're others around you. And so I think when you see those standards that aren't right, you speak up and you try and change it, but also be very aware of there's so much subtlety in the world and in conversation and engagement. And when you see those things, also call them out. I've done a lot of fitness events and activities, and I've done fitness shows. And there was, I still remember this. There was one of the reasons I do it is, as a survivor of abuse, it's really important for me to understand that my body is physically capable of being strong and powerful, and not what has been built into my mind at times, which is weak. And so I've done Tough Mudders and fitness contests and all that stuff. And there was a picture that got posted when I was in one of the contests. And this was probably 7-8 years ago now. And someone, I don't even know who they are, had written about, wow, isn't she chunky? She shouldn't have even been doing this, right? And why would someone that looks like that do this? And there's a couple of ways I could have gone about it. I could have just said, I don't even know who this person is. I'm going to let that comment go. And there are times you need to do that. But also, I don't know who this person is. They don't know who I am. And they felt that they could make that judgment. And I'm not okay with that. And so I wrote back, listen, you don't know who I am, and you don't know why I was there. But let me tell you, my body was there to be strong for my mind. And if you find that being on the outside and judging someone publicly when you don't know their backstory, you don't ask why they're there, is what you're going to do, that's that may, and I think I wrote may because I didn't want to be accusatory, but that speaks to your character. I think I had a pretty long response to them. They deleted their comment. So, but it's little things too, where, if you're out with your friends and, someone comes in and, maybe they're dressed differently than everyone else, and someone else makes a comment like, oh, why would they dress like that? Speak up and go, they dress like that because that's how they want to dress. Or they speak like that, or, they dress like that because maybe their parents can't afford new clothes. Have a lens of also, what may have contributed to that. But we tend to fall into traps of, oh my gosh, you look so beautiful. And that's, compliment. Yes, that's amazing and wonderful. But then also remind them, but I'm even more amazed by how strong you are.
I'm Jolene Loetscher. You can also just call me Jo. And I want to be our next mayor as we lead Sioux Falls into the future.
I've said from the first day of this campaign that this is a city of opportunity, where it's given me the opportunity to grow my businesses and to raise my daughter and to build my career.
A lot of candidates are talking about crime, but what we need is a mayor that's actually done something about it.
Deciding to run for office was shaped by a lot of factors. Obviously, we had Jolene's Law. I understood the power of policy. I had seen firsthand, too, in our fights and our struggles and our successes, the difference it made when people in elected office are caring, when they're compassionate, when they're willing to learn and to listen, which we don't have as much of, and dare I say, hardly any of anymore.
First and foremost, secrecy from your mayor is not acceptable. And so that means we are going to commit to taking that door down, and you've heard me say that time and time again because it is so important. The value of our city is not singularly identified by a day of the week, by the color of someone's skin, by who they choose to love, or where they come from. We're going to be sure that families have access to the mental health resources they need, affordable housing, planning for transportation, keeping our roads repaired, and looking at public transportation. Our precinct-focused policing plan that's supported by law enforcement creates locations and community centers closer to where you live to improve response times. It's smart spending too, using facilities we already own, and because the law enforcement center is out of space for new officers. I have been talking to the mayors of bigger cities in Austin and Houston and in Denver about how they have built their downtowns, how they have invested in entertainment districts, and how they have moved their cities forward.
I wanted to figure out, how do I serve? How do I take that experience? What does it look like? And decided when Libby started thinking about it when she was about 5 weeks old. So first time mom, 5-week-old baby. And
let's run for office. Let's go.
That's pretty much how it went. Debated it, went back and forth. Do I, don't I? And my husband Nate was just an amazing support, and he was, yes, this is what you should do, and I'm here. And in my mind, I'm just like, well, how are we going to make it work and all this stuff? And that's, again, my mother-in-law is a saint. Like, she helped. And to your point about, I think, double standards for women and girls, I was always getting asked about why would I do it when my daughter was so young, and other men who ran at the same time, and I was the only woman that ran in that cycle. It was on the ballot.
At one point, it was against 5 men, right?
At one point, it was against 7 other men. Originally, there were 8, and then eventually a couple didn't make it through. So originally there were 8 altogether. And, they were never asked about, well, how do you juggle your family, or why would you do it when your children are this age, or why, they never got asked any of that. They also probably didn't get comments on their Facebook page of, why does your hair look like it does, right? That double standard that we had talked about earlier. But I decided, you know what, we're going to do this. Nate and I made a decision as a family where we didn't know what we were doing, but we were going to do it and lean into the experience, and it was going to be a family experience. So that's why my daughter did go as many places as I could take her with me.
Why does everybody do it?
Because it was really important for me that she be there, she'd be part of it, and that I be with her as well. And so it was a wild and crazy journey. I think we started the conversation when she was 5 weeks old about, do we do this, do we not? And then announced when she was 4 months old. And then the night of, let's see, which one was it? The night of the first election, because we ended up making it to the runoff, she took her first steps. And then the night of the second election, the runoff, when we lost, at that point, then she was 1. She had turned 1 just right before that. So it was super crazy already, first year of being a parent, but then also put that on it. And just, you need to, when you see things are not right, ask, what can I do to fix it? Mm-hmm. And I just very much felt like we were at a point where we weren't seeing women run for office. And if nothing else, there was going to be someone out there, probably a girl, that needed to see that. And, maybe she would run someday and maybe she wouldn't, but maybe she's little and someday she grows up and she says, I remember that there was this one woman. Right. Well, and so it's about role modeling too. You don't have to win an election to be victorious.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I had the opportunity a few minutes ago to call Paul and to congratulate him. It is a tremendous responsibility, as we all know, to represent the voices that have voted for you, those that didn't, and those that can't. And Nate and Liberty and I will continue to lift Paul and his family up in prayer on the new journey that is before them. As for us, this is the city of opportunity, and today we prove that with the victory of possibility. A year ago, none of us even knew this journey would happen, and yet here we are, celebrating.
Victory is in the impact, not always in society's defined outcome. And so if society says the only way for that to have been a victorious campaign was that you won, which obviously I didn't, then how many people have failed in their life? Right? How many? There's always at least one winner and one loser. Someone will always win and someone will always lose. But that doesn't mean who you think won actually won. And so it's about also, I think, to anyone that's listening, who's watching this, how will I serve? How will I give back? What will I role model? Who will I be a voice for? I know lots of people that have run for office and they haven't won, but they have proven that a Black man can run for office and be proud to be a Black man running for office. Have proven that it's a lot of work to run, but you can still do it if you're a new mom. And also just represented voices that need to hear and see that they're not alone.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Allen. First up this evening, we catch up with Jolene Loetscher. Just more than a year ago, Loetscher survived Sioux Falls mayoral primary election to compete in a runoff with now Mayor Paul Tenhaken. Loetscher is now engaged in a new political endeavor as part of a nationwide program that gives her access to some of the nation's top leaders.
Shortly after was selected to be part of the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. So PLS is a program with the foundations and the libraries of President George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, President Clinton, and then President Lyndon B. Johnson.
I know 2 people are glad he's not running for president.
That was my line. All right. I thought you all.
I know two who are glad he didn't run earlier.
Loetscher went through an application and screening process for the program and then was approved to take part. She and 59 other people from all across the nation are in this year's program.
This is for people that are already making change in their community and that that they believe have the power to significantly grow that change by developing a network of people around them, but also learning from the presidencies and the leadership decisions that they had to do. So it's about continuing the work that you're already doing, putting that into action and growing it.
Already, Loetscher has met with advisors and family members of former President, the late George H.W. Bush. Last month, she had the opportunity to discuss political theory and political activism with former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and former President Bill Clinton.
It's indescribable to be in a room with only 59 other people, well, and the Secret Service, and to have a former President of the United States walk in there and know that you can ask them anything. And that's what's so crucial about this program, is that I can't tell you what we talked about or what we asked them, because they want us to truly learn and to grow. And so it is an off-the-record, no holds barred, ask the questions so that you grow, because these presidents and their families and the libraries truly believe in this next generation of leadership.
And already from this program, Loetscher says her fundamental beliefs about politics have been confirmed.
What matters in politics is the people more than anything else.
Some ballots still to be counted. President-elect Joe Biden already has earned more votes than any presidential candidate in American history. The second largest number belongs to President Donald Trump in this election. Those massive partisan numbers remind us the United States is a divided country.
I'm not going to answer the question.
Why
because,
would you answer that
because
question?
the question is
Justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
If Donald Trump announced a cure for cancer at tonight's rally in Minnesota, CNN would denounce him for fixing drug prices.
Things became heated between protesters and counter-protesters.
Members of the legislature were informed that they should don their gas mask.
The government did this to us. We were normal, good, law-abiding citizens.
We have come into a world where it's so easy to decide who someone is by either a single letter behind their name or a state where they reside, or all of these other factors. And we forget to see people for the whole of who they are. And there are bad people. Not everyone is good, but not everyone is also all bad. And I think where we are today, as a country, and even in our communities, we need to just sometimes stop and find the humanity in the moment, and find the sharedness. And that's not to say that we don't fight and we don't rally and we don't do what is for the greater good, but it's also remembering that not everyone who acts differently than us is completely different than us, and that also we may not understand why they did what they did. When I was running for office, we were doing a meet and greet. And we were holding like these, we called them Cup of Joe events, and one was at the flea market. And a man came up to me and he said, "I want you to know that I voted for Trump." Now, I didn't. And even though the mayor's race was nonpartisan, it was, and eventually did become much more so. And, he looks at me, I voted for Trump. And I said, okay. I was like, well, I can't change what he voted, how he voted. And clearly there's a reason he wants to tell me that, and that's going to be what that's going to be. And he stopped and he looks at me and he goes, "Well, don't you want to know why?" And that caught me, That very much caught me, because my initial thought was like, well, I know why, but did I? And so I said, well, tell me, why'd you vote for him? He said, well, I want you to know I voted for Barack Obama, and I voted for Hillary Clinton too. And I just have to have someone that I thought could change the system, because the system wasn't working for me. I wanted somebody different. And that's why I voted like that. And I'm telling this story because I think the question he asked me is one we have to start asking ourselves more. Don't you want to know why? Don't you want to know why people are so angry? Don't you want to know why people are so disenfranchised? Don't you want to know why a mother is working 2 jobs and she is struggling to feed her children, and those children are going to a school where their education is not what they deserve or should have? Don't you want to know why? And then when you know the why, don't you want to make it better, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, he, that parting question was, I think, where we're at, and what gives me hope, right? People are asking that, and we need to just do more and more of that. We need to do more of this, and don't you want to know why?
Although times are different, Jolene has not stopped working for the greater good or advocating for change. And although it can be hard to find the light, many moments, including one seeing her mother-in-law, another role model of hers, voting for the very first time in the 2020 election with her granddaughter, show that when we inspire others, when we have tough conversations, when we are honest, the best things imaginable can happen.
We, the people, have the power to build a better future.
And those kinds of things call for celebration.
Seeing then Vice President-elect Harris coming up on that stage, and knowing that my daughter was going to know a country that had a woman as its vice president. She saw a vice president. And so that was, it was probably overwhelming, I think, for me, knowing that what she would see as possible was so much different than what I saw as possible when I was her age.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
I'm so grateful and excited that she's going to see a world where we are breaking those barriers and those glass ceilings.
This is my story. This isn't the end of my story. This is the beginning of my story. And now it is my utmost honor and privilege to ask you to share that story as well. Thank you.
Jolene, in your own words, who is Jolene Loetscher?
Oh, goodness. In my own words, I'm a mama just trying to make the world better.
I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath, scared to rock the